Would you like to be more connected and informed about your community? If so, it's time to find out who's doing what around town with MOOTpoint. MOOTpoint is a local podcast that covers the issues and topics that are relevant to all residents in Albion, Maine. MOOTpoint is a production of The Moo at moo202.org. And now, here's the host of MOOTpoint, Brad Taylor.
Welcome to another edition of MOOTpoint. I'm Brad Taylor, and on this episode, I'm going to be talking with Julie McKenzie about a brand new health and sanitation ordinance, which is up for a vote at the town meeting. Town meeting is scheduled for Saturday, March 17th, and so this is a conversation that hopefully will give you enough information so that you can decide either for or against the health and sanitation ordinance. So, Julie, I want to thank you for being willing to come on this edition of MOOTpoint and talk about the Town of Albion's Health and Sanitation Ordinance. How did you get involved in this?
Well, I am part of the Town Budget Committee, and when we had our meeting, I believe that was in February, following the Budget Committee meeting, they had a special hearing to discuss this ordinance. And I hadn't heard of the ordinance prior to that time, so I asked some questions and got a copy of it, and there were about 5 of us from the Budget Committee that stayed and had some discussion with the selectmen, and just had a lot of questions about this.
Okay. So now this ordinance is going to be voted on at the town meeting, which is coming up on Saturday, March 17th. 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm assuming it's going to be at the elementary school gymnasium?
I believe it will be at the Bessie building.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Attendance has been lower, so they usually can fit everybody in there.
Oh, okay.
But I could be wrong about that. I'll have to check that, and the details will be on their Facebook page, and you can call the town office, and it'll be on the booklet that comes out as well.
Oh, okay. Do we know when that booklet is coming out?
I talked to the town clerk this morning, and she wasn't sure. It's in for printing. They'll be posting the warrant, which isn't the complete report, but they'll be posting copies of that around town today, I believe, or tomorrow. The booklets will be available as soon as they get them printed, so hopefully sometime next week.
And usually those are available at the town office?
Town office and all the businesses in town.
Oh, okay. Good enough. So now explain to me, what is the health and sanitation ordinance?
From what I understand, and I'm actually just going to read the purpose of it, this says, the purpose of this ordinance is to promote healthful and sanitary living conditions for Albion residents by preventing the pollution that may be caused by inadequate, malfunctioning, or uninstalled subsurface wastewater disposal systems. The ordinance is increasing local compliance with one of the state of Maine rules, and it protects the health, safety, and welfare of Albion residents.
So when you attended the hearing that you went to, did they give any indication as to how big a problem this is in the town of Albion?
I believe my understanding was that it was just maybe in the early phases of a potential problem. There were a couple of instances that they were aware of where there were some people living in small portions of another property that may or may not have had any running water or a waste system. And they, without an ordinance in the town, they really aren't able to further investigate it. They've tried to do that, but the authorities said you don't have an ordinance, so that we can't even check it out any further.
So, the town of Albion has a code enforcement officer.
They do.
And wouldn't that sort of thing normally come under their purview?
Apparently not quite enough. It refers to the code enforcement officer and the licensed plumbing inspector throughout the ordinance, but I don't know if they have anything specific for checking the water systems. and having any kind of a law to fall back on to require them to make any changes.
Now, normally, don't you need to have a code enforcement officer sign off on a property before it can be inhabited?
I believe so, and I believe that's part of the difficulty is that these are apparently on properties where there's already a residence, and so they've already signed off on this, but these might be small outbuildings that were not meant to be dwellings. And it seems, from what I remember of the conversation, they had some indication that those outbuildings were being utilized as dwellings, and they really didn't have a way to check those because they're on the property of someone else that's already been approved.
Okay. So give me a few specifics from the ordinance of what it specifically puts into effect as far as what's allowed and what's not allowed.
One of the sections here indicates that no person shall occupy or offer to rent out a dwelling, including a primitive camp, within the town of Albion without first obtaining an occupancy permit from the licensed plumbing inspector. And then they give some specifics on the criteria for an occupancy permit. And part of that is an adequate supply of running water, and also that the dwelling is served by a legal and functioning subsurface wastewater disposal system that is in compliance with the state of Maine. And then there's a lot more detail about primitive systems, the amount of water that may be utilized. They do try to specify a primitive camp, the off-road camps versus an outbuilding on another property. And so there's some specifics that way. Then it also mentions no person shall occupy or offer to rent out a new dwelling until the licensed plumbing inspector has certified these sources of running water and the wastewater disposal. And then
So would that apply to, say, somebody putting on an addition and mother-in-law apartment or something like that?
I don't know that it would count as that. I think it would count as, again, if you had a home on the property and had a shed or an outbuilding or a trailer, and someone started to actually live in that. I think it's more of that kind of a situation. This next point here talks about occupying or offering to rent out an existing dwelling that's been vacant for a year that has changed ownership, and then some of the requirements for that. There needs to be a water test, and then two others, utilizing a recreational vehicle or a travel trailer as a dwelling for over 6 months without an occupancy permit, or residing in a recreational vehicle or travel trailer for over a month, that they may be required to furnish proof of a legal disposal of sanitary waste. So this just gives the town the ability to follow up on these things and enforce them.
Okay. All right. Any other specifics in this particular ordinance?
It has 4 definitions that are clarified. One is the definition of an alternative toilet. One is the definition of a bunkhouse. One is the definition of a dwelling, and one as a temporary portable toilet. Those are specified.
Okay. All right. We'll take a brief break right now, and we'll come back, and then we'll find out. We'll get your opinions on some of this stuff.
Okay.
Do you moo? Currently, the only way to listen to Albion's local radio station, The Moo, is by using the TuneIn radio app. The TuneIn radio app can be downloaded for free from either the App Store or the Play Store on your phone or tablet. Once you have the app, search for The Moo. After it appears, click on the heart emblem to make The Moo one of your favorites. Then, each time you open the app, it will automatically start playing The Moo. Here's one other tip. If the station keeps cutting out, go into the TuneIn Radio app settings and make the buffering time longer. By doing that, you'll have a smoother, more enjoyable experience. Remember, the Moo is the only radio station that talks exclusively about life in Albion. So if you'd like to feel more connected to our community, listen to the Moo using the TuneIn Radio app.
Well, we're back, and we're talking about the Town of Albion Health and Sanitation Ordinance, which is going to be voted on at the annual town meeting, which is coming up on Saturday, March 17th, 10 o'clock in the morning. And if you'd like to get a copy of this, it should be available very soon, either at the town office or at local businesses, where you can get it and read it ahead of time so that you can make a decision about whether you'd like to vote for this or against this. My position in doing this interview is I have no position, but Julie may have a position. And so the first thing I want to find out from you, after you have read through this and studied it, what do you think is really good about this ordinance? How do you think it's going to be a benefit to the town of Albion?
I think it just gives a little accountability to people who are coming to town and just trying to plop themselves into a situation that might not be the most sanitary for them and maybe not for the people around them. I think it's good to just be able to look at living conditions for children that might be present, and also if they're near a stream or any place that has runoff, which is pretty much everywhere, that their waste is being handled properly and not potentially running off into someone else's well or contaminating a garden or something else like that.
Okay. So it has very direct implications for the health and safety of the people who live in Albion.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Now, I have, when this subject has come up and some other people have been around, I've seen facial expressions and reactions where people say, well, what do you mean we can't do this? We've always done this and haven't had a problem. And this meaning whatever it is that they're referring to, in their mind. So when you look at this, do you have some concerns about what it's going to not allow people to do and what sort of negative impact that might have?
I do have a few concerns or additional questions. As far as I can see in this ordinance, this doesn't have any kind of an allowance for an extenuating circumstance where, for whatever reason, someone may be required to live in a trailer or an RV for a period of time, utilizing a portable toilet that is cleaned on a regular basis by a licensed business. It doesn't really allow for that beyond potentially a month. They might be able to provide some receipts of using a dumping system, but according to this, a temporary portable toilet is not to be utilized.
Now, when you say temporary portable toilet, what exactly is that?
What we would call a porta potty.
Okay.
Things that are found at baseball fields and work sites and things like that. Those are utilized at what they say here. The definition is that it's designed for use typically at social functions, work site, outdoor gatherings, etc., which is serviced weekly, not to be used as an alternative toilet for a dwelling. So, I've known of situations where families or individuals have had to live in a recreational vehicle for maybe a period of 5 or 6 months as a house is being rebuilt or just built in general, and utilizing some of their businesses that clean these toilets on a regular basis. But according to this ordinance, that's not adequate. Now, the selectmen, when we brought this up as an issue, they said that there could be exceptions, which I think is awesome, looking at things in a case-by-case situation. However, if it's not written in here, anyone could come, I believe, and with this ordinance and say there are no exceptions listed here. and therefore they would have to take action. And I know that there are some situations where people are working very hard, and because of their situation, they're limited and might need to utilize some of the setups that are actually prohibited in this ordinance. And their goal is not to do that on a permanent basis, but temporary. And I just don't see that this ordinance allows for that.
Okay. So is it possible, you say they can allow exceptions. Since we're voting on it, I'm assuming that this is not something that the selectmen are able to do on their own. In other words, they couldn't just have a vote amongst the selectmen and say, this is a new ordinance that we're going to enforce in town. Evidently, this needs the vote of the citizens of the community. So therefore, if they're going to be doing exceptions, does that allow them or not allow them to do exceptions?
I believe, I'm not absolutely positive with this particular ordinance, but I know that one of the issues in the warrant that we vote on every year is giving the selectmen the ability to make decisions on our behalf, on the town's behalf, for various things. This might fall under that, and it might not. I don't know the specifics of that. So I don't know if there is allowed to be an amendment placed on this at the meeting and voted that way, or if it would have to be voted down and rewritten. I'm not quite sure what the process would have to be for having that kind of an exception either enforced at their discretion, or whether something would need to be placed in here specifically.
So basically, that sounds like one of the questions that needs to be asked at the town meeting.
Exactly.
Okay. So I think we basically covered the topic, unless there's anything that you didn't get a chance to express.
I don't believe so. One of the only things that I had intended to find out, and I did not get as far as doing this, was to contact one of our local businesses that operates the temporary portable toilets to see what standards they operate under. It's obviously got to be very stringent to have these that are serviced weekly, and the adequacy of that over a period of time. Again, it's supposed to be, in this ordinance, it's attached to a dwelling. So what they specify as that is a structure, no matter the size or dimensions, used as habitation, containing any of the following items for independent living: heating, cooking, sleeping, bathing, or sanitary facilities. So I would just like to find out from those businesses if using a portable toilet for what period of time they consider to be adequate for a dwelling to be safe.
Okay. So I guess we have some questions, but in another week or so, we'll get a chance to get those questions answered at the town meeting.
Yes, we will.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Julie, for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So that's the end of another episode of MOOTpoint. I hope this was informative for you and gives you the opportunity to decide whether you want to vote for or against the Town of Albion's Health and Sanitation Ordinance, which is going to be up for a vote on Saturday, March 17th.
You've been listening to MOOTpoint. Please take a moment to like us on Facebook, and we'll let you know when we have our next community conversation with someone who's doing something interesting here in Albion. MOOTpoint is a production of The Moo, home of the Albion Community Calendar and the Moo Country Music Stream at moo202.org.